to the whole event. They saw how important it was that new fans were getting involved in golf, especially women's golf.
The sun had barely climbed over the horizon, yet the course was already alive. You could feel it. The buzz, the whispers, the heartbeat of something rare. Hundreds of fans pressed against the ropes, cameras ready, signs waving in the air. But this wasn't your typical morning at a golf event. Today, all eyes weren't on the fairway. They were on Caitlyn Clark, the basketball sensation who had just stepped into a completely different arena. As she adjusted her visor and gripped the club, you could sense the mix of nerves and determination on her face. She wasn't here to prove she was a golfer. She was here to show what her presence meant. And what it meant was about to shake the entire world of women's sports. Because while the LPGA welcomed her with open arms, the WNBA, her own league, was quietly fuming. This, right here, wasn't just a golf story. It was a collision of pride, progress, and power. It started as a simple invitation. The LPGA was hosting a special celebrity pro-am event, a mix of stars, athletes, and golf icons. Someone on the organizing team had a bold idea. What if we invited Caitlyn Clark? To them, it was genius. Clark wasn't just the hottest name in basketball. She was a cultural phenomenon. Her college games broke records. Her WNBA debut sold out arenas. Her name alone drew millions of new eyes to women's sports. And so, the LPGA extended the invitation. No one could have predicted what happened next. Tickets sold out faster than anyone imagined. TV crews lined up. Golf fans, basketball fans, even people who had never watched women's sports before. Everyone wanted to see what Caitlyn Clark would do. For the LPGA, it was electric. Finally, women's golf had its viral moment. Finally, it felt like the spotlight had shifted toward them. But somewhere else, that light cast a shadow. Inside the WNBA community, whispers began to grow louder. Why was she playing golf? Why was she stealing the headlines again? And more importantly, why was every conversation about women's sports suddenly about her? When the day arrived, it looked like a championship Sunday. The crowd was massive. The cameras followed her every move. The LPGA couldn't believe what they were seeing. Caitlyn's first swing wasn't perfect, but it didn't matter. The crowd erupted anyway. Every smile, every laugh, every moment she spent interacting with fans felt larger than life. LPGA stars like Nelly Korda and Lexi Thompson couldn't help but notice. Nelly later said, "It was so refreshing to see so many new faces out here. People who'd never been to a women's golf event before." That was the point. Caitlyn had done in one weekend what marketing campaigns had tried for years. She brought a new audience, young, excited, and ready to support women's sports. For the LPGA, it was a celebration. For women's sports as a whole, it should have been a triumph. But it wasn't. Behind the scenes, a very different reaction was brewing. Certain WNBA figures, both players and fans, started expressing frustration online. They claimed Caitlyn Clark's fame had overshadowed veteran athletes who'd been working for decades to grow the league. It wasn't that they hated her. It was something deeper. A sense that the spotlight she brought wasn't shared equally. When the LPGA posted highlight clips of Clark, engagement soared. Meanwhile, some WNBA accounts noticed their posts being buried under waves of Clark-related content. To some, it felt unfair. To others, it felt inevitable. The question hanging in the air was simple, but heavy. Was Caitlyn Clark lifting women's sports or dividing them? For the LPGA, the answer was simple and bold. They didn't hesitate, overthink, or draw lines in the sand. They opened their arms. They welcomed Caitlyn Clark with genuine excitement, celebrated her appearance, and publicly thanked her for bringing a surge of fresh energy into their world. They didn't see her as a threat. They saw her as an ally, someone who could help reshape how people viewed women's sports altogether. To them, Caitlyn wasn't stepping into golf to steal attention. She was expanding the audience, showing that fans could cross boundaries just like she did. The LPGA understood something vital that many still miss. Fans don't need to choose. They can love golf and basketball. They can cheer for Nelly Korda's perfect swing and Caitlyn Clark's logo range three-pointer in the same breath. Passion isn't limited. It multiplies when it's shared. By embracing Clark, the LPGA tapped into something far bigger than competition. They tapped into connection. They created a shared moment that transcended sport. At that event, fans weren't just watching golf. They were part of a movement. The energy, the crossover, the unity. It all felt historic. You could sense it in the cheers, the laughter, the tears of young girls watching from the ropes. And in that moment, the LPGA discovered the true secret to growth. It wasn't about protecting their turf. It was about opening the gates and letting the world in. The WNBA, on the other hand, struggled to find its footing. What should have been a unifying moment began to splinter from within. Inside locker rooms and press conferences, the air grew heavier. Reporters noticed the shift. Players chose their words carefully, some dodging questions, others making subtle jabs. A few veteran voices insisted the league didn't need saving from a rookie. Some went further, suggesting that the sudden influx of Caitlyn Clark fans weren't true WNBA fans, but outsiders who didn't understand the league's culture or history. The tone was defensive, almost territorial. It was as if Clark's rise had touched a nerve, one that ran deeper than basketball. Her success forced the league to confront questions it had long avoided. Questions about visibility, about marketing, about why, despite decades of effort, one player could suddenly bring in the attention they'd been chasing for years. And yet, through it all, Caitlyn never fired back. She didn't clap back on social media. She didn't engage in the drama. Instead, she smiled. She showed up. She played hard. She spoke with grace and maturity far beyond her years, constantly reminding the world that her goal wasn't to overshadow anyone. It was to uplift all women's sports. And maybe, just maybe, that's what stung the most. Because her words revealed something undeniable. She wasn't fighting the old system. She was quietly outgrowing it. She wasn't waiting for the WNBA to change. She was showing what change already looked like. Imagine for a moment if the WNBA had seen what the LPGA saw. Imagine if, instead of retreating into silence, they had leaned into the moment, promoted her crossover, celebrated her reach, stood beside her, shoulder to shoulder, as a symbol of unity and shared progress. The narrative could have been powerful, uplifting even. Basketball's brightest star helps grow women's golf. It could have been a campaign about collaboration, not competition. About the strength that comes when women's sports link arms instead of drawing lines. But that didn't happen. Instead, the silence from the league spoke louder than any press release ever could. No congratulatory posts, no shared highlights, no proud shout-outs. Just quiet, uncomfortable, noticeable quiet. And the fans noticed. Across social media, discussions flared up. Thousands began asking why the LPGA could celebrate Clark so openly, while her own league seemed hesitant. Memes, comparisons, and commentary flooded feeds. One comment, short but sharp, went viral. LPGA understands marketing. WNBA understands jealousy. Harsh words, but they captured the growing frustration many fans felt. Because while the LPGA was gaining new followers, fresh sponsorships, and a wave of goodwill, the WNBA seemed to be losing something priceless, a chance to lead, to inspire, to be part of a moment that transcended the court, a moment it may never get back. At the event, there was a special kind of energy in the air, something that felt bigger than a game, bigger than a headline. Parents brought their daughters, hoping they'd see what possibility looks like in real life. Teenagers wore Clark jerseys, even though it was a golf course, not a basketball arena. Some carried handmade signs, others just carried excitement that buzzed through the crowd like electricity. People stayed long after the final putt, just to catch one more glimpse of her, one more smile, one more wave. For many of them, it wasn't just their first time seeing Caitlyn, it was their first time ever attending a live women's sporting event. And that mattered, because this wasn't about golf. It was about inspiration, about connection, about showing that talent, charisma, and courage can break through any boundary. One little girl, interviewed after the match, said softly, "I used to watch her play basketball. Now, I want to try golf too." Just one sentence, but it said everything. That's the magic Caitlyn Clark brings. She bridges worlds that were never meant to be separate. She makes people believe that women's sports don't have to compete with each other. They can rise together, stronger, and more united than ever. But for some, that idea is still hard to accept, because change, even when it's beautiful, always threatens those who built comfort in the old ways. The truth is, fear drives much of this divide. It's not hatred, not jealousy, just fear. For years, the WNBA has fought tooth and nail for every ounce of recognition, every broadcast slot, every sponsorship deal. Their journey was built on persistence, resilience, and endless battles to prove they belonged. Every inch of progress came with struggle. Then suddenly, a single player, Caitlyn Clark, did in a few months what the league had been fighting to achieve for decades: global attention, mainstream buzz, a cultural moment. For some veterans, that didn't feel like progress. It felt like erasure, like their years of sacrifice were being overshadowed by one newcomer's spotlight. To some, it felt like disrespect. To others, it was simply evolution, the natural shift that happens when the next generation breaks barriers in ways the previous one never could. The LPGA chose to embrace that evolution. They opened their arms and invited it in, understanding that Caitlyn's fame wasn't a threat, it was an opportunity. The WNBA, however, chose to resist it, tightening its grip on old hierarchies and familiar fears. And in doing so, the two leagues revealed two completely different mindsets. One focused on protection, preserving what was. The other focused on progression, building what could be. What Caitlyn Clark's story teaches us is far bigger than basketball or golf. It's about what true leadership looks like in moments of change. It's about collaboration over competition, vision over fear. The LPGA saw beyond boundaries. They didn't just see a basketball player, they saw an opportunity to grow, to connect, to invite new fans into their world. They recognized that the future of women's sports belongs to those who share the spotlight, not guard it. The WNBA, on the other hand, saw disruption and tried to contain it. But history has never been kind to those who fight the tide of change. Every movement that's tried to control evolution has eventually been consumed by it. Caitlyn Clark isn't just an athlete. She's a mirror reflecting what's next. A world where women's sports are no longer siloed by league, game, or genre, but celebrated across every platform and every audience. She represents a generation that connects through stories, energy, and authenticity. Her rise is rewriting the rules, tearing down walls that kept women's sports fragmented for decades. And whether the WNBA likes it or not, Caitlyn Clark is carrying the future with her. One that's faster, louder, more connected, and impossible to ignore. When the dust settles and fans look back at this moment, they'll remember the LPGA event as more than a tournament. It was a statement, a shift, a spark that lit something far greater than a single round of golf. It was a turning point. It showed that growth comes from inclusion, not isolation. That the future of women's sports isn't built on fences, but on bridges. It reminded everyone watching that progress doesn't happen when leagues guard their territory, but when they open their doors and share the spotlight. Women's sports can only thrive when leagues lift each other, not compete for scraps of attention. The LPGA understood that, and for one unforgettable weekend, they showed the world what unity looks like. The cheers that followed Caitlyn down every fairway weren't just for her. They were for every woman who ever dreamed of being seen, supported, and celebrated. Caitlyn Clark showed what happens when one person dares to cross boundaries, to ignore the limits others try to set, and to believe that fans don't belong to one sport. They belong to the movement itself. And the league that understands that first will win the future. Because, make no mistake, this isn't just about Caitlyn Clark. This is about a revolution that's already started. One swing, one shot, and one fearless step at a time. As the sun dipped over the golf course that evening, Caitlyn Clark smiled, waved, and thanked the crowd. Her first day on the LPGA course was over, but her impact had just begun. The cameras panned out, showing the thousands who came to watch, to cheer, to feel part of something bigger. You could almost hear the hum of hope in the air, the sound of history quietly unfolding. For a brief moment, the divisions didn't matter. Not the leagues, not the rivalries, not the headlines that tried to turn her success into someone else's loss. What mattered was what she represented: possibility, progress, and proof that women's sports could pull in the kind of passion the world had long said they couldn't. The LPGA didn't just gain a guest that weekend, they gained a spark that reignited belief. And somewhere, deep in the echoes of that applause, you could sense what might happen if women's sports stood shoulder to shoulder instead of back to back. Maybe one day, leagues like the WNBA will realize that stars like Caitlyn Clark aren't a threat. They're the bridge to everything they've ever dreamed of. Because in the end, the real opponent isn't each other. It's the belief that women's sports can't shine together. And Caitlyn Clark, in her own quiet way, is proving that they can. She didn't just swing a club that day, she swung open a door,